A few house notes, what is it called? A few house notes, house
The
rules,
housekeeping.
housekeeping. There you go. Thank you. My goodness. Thank you, Kathy. Please remember to keep your microphones muted until prompted by the host, beautiful host, Karen Jones. For questions, feel free to drop them in the chat and we will try our best to get to them at the end of each section. I'm going to drop websites, mailing lists, and newsletter links in the chat. And lastly, before I start talking a little bit about Ma, for English captions, simply click the CC icon at the bottom of your Zoom screen. I would like to thank Total Captions and Ramona, who's furiously typing away to make sure that we capture everything here today. So a little bit about Mid-America Arts Alliance and Engage. Mid-America Arts Alliance strengthens and supports artists, cultural organizations, and communities throughout the region and beyond. We are a nonprofit regional arts organization representing Arkansas, Kansas, Missouri, Nebraska, Oklahoma, and Texas that focuses on strengthening communities and improving lives through extraordinary cultural experiences. Mid-America Arts Alliance's Engage program provides community-centered professional and organizational development that focuses on leadership training for small to mid-sized arts and cultural organizations. Using a combination of workshops, coach consultations, and peer-to-peer learning opportunities, Engage works with participants to govern more effectively, become more fiscally astute, and develop strategies to address community needs. And of course, the community needs Karen Jones. Jones combines coaching and caring with professional services, creating a safe place to explore ideas, options, implement solutions, and address the challenges that keep you from achieving your goals. Since starting Mission to Transition, that's Karen's company, I'll put that link in the chat. She has focused on helping clients achieve their goals. Jones uses her education in law, international business, communications, and sociology, as well as her extensive experience working with global corporations, academia, organizations, and small businesses, excuse me. She is a certified mediator and certified breath coach. She uses exceptional coaching and consulting skills combined with passion and creativity to bring value to her clients. For more information about Karen Jones and Mission to Transition, I will drop this link in the chat. And thank you all again for joining us. And I'm going to pass it on to Karen. Hey, Karen.
Hello, Karis. Thank you very much for the introduction and thank you for the opportunity to talk about advanced conflict management to this group. And thank you all for signing up for this workshop. So some of you might have been on the workshop a couple of weeks ago. And actually, just out of curiosity, just so that I know, how many of you did attend that first workshop. If you attended the first workshop, would you type yes in the chat? If you did not, then please type no in the chat. And while you're doing that, I should also mention that attending that first workshop a couple of weeks ago is not a prerequisite to attending today. You do not need to have attended last week or the last workshop in order to get a lot of benefit out of today. But I do see that so far, there's one no. So most of you, it looks like, attended the workshop a couple of weeks ago. And the only reason I really asked was so that I'm aware, because I might happen to say something like, oh, last workshop or in the first workshop, and I just want you to know what I'm referring to. So again, there's no need for you to have attended the last workshop to get benefit from this one. So then I am going to, just go over some of the objectives of the workshop today. So this, my goal is by the end of this workshop, you will know your own individualized, personalized conflict management style. So we're going to do an assessment of your conflict management style. So that's number one. And then you're going to be able to identify ways to address conflict by using the knowledge around conflict management styles. You will also be able to understand how to create a workable action plan to assist you in resolving workplace conflict. And then finally, you will have additional tools that you can apply to your workplace practices so that you can effectively manage conflict. So those are the objectives for today. Now, since most of you attended the last workshop a couple of weeks ago, you know that I like to establish a safe space to work. We're all coming in from different things. You're either switching from another Zoom session into this one, or you're thinking about dinner later on, or whatever it is. I really want to kind of bring us together in this space so that we can do the work that needs to be done during this workshop. And so I like to use breathing to establish a safe space, a safe space to work. And so today, what I'd like us to do is a breathing exercise. This breathing exercise is a deep breathing exercise. It's actually in the category of a box breathing exercise. And a box breathing exercise is basically one that has the same number of counts. You hold on the exhale and then hold again. It helps with relaxation, it helps with focus, because as you perform this breathing practice, you should really be concentrating on the breath that you're taking. Always inhaling and exhaling through your nose. Your feet should be flat on the floor, about hips width apart. You should be sitting up straight, back away from from whatever you're sitting in. So back away from the chair, but relaxed. And so the way this exercise like this: inhale 1, 2, 3, 4. Hold 1, 2, 3, 4. Exhale 4, 3, 2, 1. Hold 4, 3, 2, 1. Okay, so that's the way. Again, you're inhale 4, holding for 4, exhaling for 4, and holding for 4. And we're going to do 4 rounds of that. Okay, so if everyone's ready, and I'm going to also ask you to close your eyes, because again, that helps you to focus on your breathing. Okay, so feet flat on the floor, back away from your chair, and we'll begin. Close your eyes. We'll begin. Inhale 1, 2, 3, 4. Hold 1, 2, 3, 4. Exhale 4, 3, 2, 1. Hold 4, 3, 2, 1. Inhale 1, 2, 3, 4. Hold 1, 2, 3, 4. Exhale 4, 3, 2, 1. Hold 4, 3, 2, 1. Inhale 1, 2, 3, 4. Hold 1, 2, 3, 4. Exhale 4, 3, 2, 1. Hold 4, 3, 2, 1. Inhale 1, 2, 3, 4. Hold 1, 2, 3, 4. Exhale 4, 3, 2, 1. Hold 4, 3, 2, and 1. And breathe normally. Okay. Okay, well, hopefully that's helped you to kind of center yourself, feel a little bit more calm, and prepared you to jump into this workshop. And so the other thing that I like to do to establish a safe space is that we mutually agree to treat this Zoom as a safe space, and that you be respectful to each other, because we will be having different discussions and breakout groups, and that you respect each other's privacy and hold our discussions confidential. And if you agree to that, I'm going to ask you to please type in the chat yes. If you disagree, please type no. Okay, so far I am seeing all yeses. Okay, and so I'm going to assume then that everyone is agreeing to this. And if you disagree, then please make yourself known, or I will assume you have dropped off the call. Okay, okay. So then let's go ahead and get started into the content of this workshop. And I'm going to start just by doing a very quick review or summary of what we discussed last time. Again, this workshop, this advanced workshop, is not a or the previous workshop is not a prerequisite to attending this workshop. You will be totally fine because each of the workshops kind of stand alone. But just to do a quick review or summary of what we covered last time, we talked quite a bit about what is conflict. That discord, disagreement goes beyond just a simple disagreement, but really causes friction, and it causes a lack of productivity in the workplace. Also, we talked about workplace sources, causes, and impacts of conflict. Some of the sources being disagreement between departments, or there being a reliance on certain information from other areas of an organization that can cause friction, change in an organization. Sometimes it's just external factors that cause conflict. Someone got stuck in traffic and it's caused them to, just kind of react in a really negative way that causes workplace conflict. It can also be health issues, family issues, a lot of things that occur outside of the workplace because we all have lives outside of the jobs that we're doing. So those are some of the sources and causes of conflict. Some of the impacts are what you see resulting in the workplace around conflict. Again, that lack of productivity, lack of engagement, so it can cause, there can be a lot of impacts of conflict. And then how to identify conflict. Sometimes conflict is very obvious. You might be either involved in the conflict directly, or you can witness others and how they're interacting with others that will suggest that there's some sort of conflict. It might also be that someone has suddenly started to not engage the way they used to, or maybe they used to be kind of happy-go-lucky, but now they're always, kind of walking around with a pensive look on their face. So there are different ways to identify conflict. And then we touched on conflict management styles, meaning that some people in dealing with conflict, the way they deal with it is just to avoid it at all costs. They're just going to avoid it. They're not going to talk about it. Just don't bother them. Others are going to be very confrontational and in your face with it. That's kind of their conflict management style. So we touched on different conflict management styles. And then approaches to conflict. We talked about the importance of either if you're in the conflict or if you're trying to intervene to assist in conflict, remaining calm and the importance of calm and tone of voice and making sure that you're not contributing to tension because your tone of voice and the way that you actually intercede can impact on whether or not the conflict escalates in that moment or whether you're able to kind of bring it down some. We also talked about timing a bit. We talked about when is the right time to intercede. Should you try and approach someone about a conflict type of situation the minute they walk in the office, or right at the heat of a disagreement, or should you wait a little while or schedule a time to talk? So we talked a little bit about that. We spent a fair amount of time talking about tools. We talked about de-escalation and how you can use calm and tone and things like that to really help to de-escalate a situation. We talked about active listening, the importance of active listening, because a lot of times individuals need an opportunity to vent. Sometimes they just really need an opportunity to be heard. And so your role in active listening can help to provide that, that for them. But then you're also actively listening, not to criticize or judge someone with regards to a particular behavior, but you're really trying to focus on listening to understand the source of the conflict and how you might help to resolve the conflict. And then the importance of neutrality and the importance of acting as a neutral was the other tool that we talked about. And how a third party neutral can really be a valuable asset in helping to resolve conflict. So that's a lot of what we talked about in the first workshop. And now today, as I mentioned, we're going to really focus on conflict styles. And we are going to start with really focusing specifically on your conflict style. And so what I'd like you to do now is please take out either a piece of paper or do it on your laptop or computer, but take a piece of paper and number it 1 through 15. Okay, piece of paper and number it 1 through 15. So what we're going to do is really assess your individual conflict management style. So on that, so I'm going to show you 15 sentences. And for each of the sentences or phrases, I would like you to give it a numerical value. And that numerical value will be a 1, 2, 3, or 4. The 1 refers to something that you rarely do. The 2 refers to sometimes, so that represents you or how you behave sometimes. The 3 represents that you often do that or often behave in the way, the identified way. Or 4 means that you always, and always doesn't necessarily mean 100% of the time. Maybe it means 99% of the time. Okay, so rarely, sometimes, often, and always. And then I'm also going to ask that you not answer the questions as you think you should answer, but instead answer the question as you actually behave. And I'm also going to ask that you move through the questions as quickly as possible. So just read the question, respond. Read the question, respond. Do not stop and think and ponder. No. First reaction is usually the right reaction. Okay? So for example, if I say, or if the question asks, states, I drive to work. Okay, would you say 1, rarely, 2, sometimes, 3, often, or 4, always? And why don't you type that in the chat just for practice? Okay, so if I said, I drive to work, is that rarely, sometimes, often, or always? Okay, and I see, okay, good. Okay, so again, there's 15 sentences. Number your paper 1 through 15 and 1 response only for each number, and move through as quickly as possible. Okay, and I'm going to give you about 3 minutes to get through the 15 statements. Okay, so you can start, you can start working on it now. Okay, so is everyone finished? Is anyone still working? Okay, I'm not seeing, okay, so now hopefully you are all finished. Then what I'd like you to do, and I know you probably didn't expect assignments like this, but what I'd like you to do is basically tally your type. So you've posted a response to each of the 15 questions. And so now, if you go through, so for example, the first part is under avoiding, it says questions 6, 10, and 15. So add up those 3 questions, whatever your response is. So if you have a 3 in each of those, you would add avoiding, okay? So go work through each one, adding up the questions that are indicated. And then after you add those up, identify the one that has the highest number for you. Okay. Oops, sorry about that. Okay, is everyone finished? Anyone still working? Okay, and again, identify the one with your highest, that you have the highest number. And what I'm going to ask you to do is type in the chat, because I like to know who I'm, what styles I'm involved with. So if you wouldn't mind typing in the chat the style that you received the highest score. And some people will have 2 that are the same number as their highest score. Yeah, equally accommodating and collaborating. Yep, and so put both. Yep, good. Yes, and usually accommodating and collaborating tend to be the ones that are often where people will end up the same score for those 2, if they have if they have 2 that are equal. Okay, good. And so there's a lot of collaborating and accommodating, which is not all that surprising, especially if a lot of you work in organizations, if you are used to working on teams. And also the other thing about styles is that people's styles, conflict styles, can change over time. Right, avoiding and accommodating, yes, that's another one that can can be, you might have the same score around those 2 if there's 2 that are kind of linked in a way. Compromise. Wow. Yeah, compromising 11, accommodating and collaborating were 10. Yeah, that's very interesting. Yeah, that's an interesting mix. Okay, wow. Okay, compromising, collaborating, all 10. Okay, wow. Okay, well, good. Then, so now that you all understand or conflict style is, we're going to go over each of the different conflict management styles. And now I want you to really guess understanding yourself and your own style. But the benefit of conflict management styles and understanding the different styles is that you can also start to recognize those styles in other people. So when you view conflict or you're involved in conflict, you can start looking at someone saying, oh, they're more of a competing style, or oh, they're more of a compromising style. And understanding the different styles will help you to start understanding how best to deal with those types of conflict management styles. Okay, so let's then talk about the different styles. Now, in order to make it a little bit more fun and to be able to identify a little bit better with the different styles, there's animals, if you will, associated with each of the styles, okay? So we have the avoiding turtle, the competing shark, the accommodating teddy bear, the compromising fox, and the collaborating owl. Okay, so those are the different types. So we're going to start with the avoiding turtle. And when you think about a turtle, you understand why we'd point that turtle to avoiding. And the other thing, let me mention, is that also try not to think of the styles as being one better than the other per se, because understanding conflict management styles, you can use all of the styles when dealing with conflict, whether it's understanding someone else's style or understanding how to best approach someone with a different style, or recognizing the differences in the different styles and taking on a different style characteristic excuse me, that might help you in dealing with conflict with others. So there's a lot of different ways you can use the different styles. So the avoiding turtle. The avoiding turtle tends to be have low concern for self and low concern for others, because their goal is non-confrontational. They just want to avoid conflict. And they value that more than either achieving a particular goal associated with the conflict, or even more than trying to preserve or enhance the relationship. Okay, so avoiding turtles are really about just conflict, withdrawing from the conflict, ignoring the fact that there may even be a conflict. Okay, so these are all characteristics of the avoiding turtle. They just find it easier to withdraw. And again, in this type of situation, that means the conflict is not resolved by either party. And so it presents a lose-lose type of scenario. Nobody wins in this type of scenario. Okay, so that's the avoiding turtle. The competing shark. The competing shark has a high concern for self. So they're all about me, and getting what it is that they want, and low concern for others. Okay, they value their own goals over the relationship. So they're really about, they're the ones that, and I know I'm going to an extreme, but they're the ones that are, I'm right, this is the way it should be, this is the way it ought to be. This person just needs to do what I say. That's a shark. Okay, they're more concerned about accomplishing their own goals than they are about being liked, because they could care less what the other person thinks about them as long as they get what they want. They tend to be uncooperative, overly assertive, and really they're just very insistent on winning. It's all about winning the dispute. Okay, you try to they tend to try to satisfy their own concerns at the expense of the other person. Okay, And so in this situation, the shark is always about winning. So they're going to win, but the other person's going to lose. Okay, so it still ends up in a win-lose type of situation. Okay, excuse me. And then we have the accommodating teddy bear. So the accommodating teddy bear has low concern for self. Okay, they're not about trying to get what they want or anything like that, but they have a very high concern for others. So they're the ones that are the pleasers. Okay, they're always trying to make sure everybody else is okay. As long as everyone else is satisfied, then they're okay. Okay, so they sacrifice their own goals in order to maintain the relationship. And this often involves them giving up their own needs, okay, giving in to the opposing party, and really giving them exactly what they want without any concern for themselves. And they're generally, again, their general goal is really that they just want to be liked. Okay, they really have a hard time with the thought of someone not liking them or being upset with them, so they're just going to give in and give the other person what they want. And again, in this situation, there's a winner and a loser only because the teddy bear, because they're not going to get really anything that they want because they're giving it up for anything that the other person wants. It presents a lose-win situation. They lose, but the other side will win because they will get something out of it. Okay? And then we have the compromising fox. The compromising fox is moderately concerned for self and others. And when you think about compromising, that's when someone they're concerned with their goals and the goals of the other party. So they're looking at goals and relationship, okay, but only moderately. And so they're the ones that are always seeking that mutual agreement. They in order to just settle the dispute. So it's not even so much about coming to what is good or right or makes sense for everyone. It's more, let's just agree. And so they tend to be the let's just split the difference kind of people. Okay, let's just come in the middle, regardless, let's just split the difference. Okay, and so that's what you end up with. Everybody tends to get something, but it's never fully what either person really wants. Okay, so the compromising fox. And then finally, we have the cooperative or collaborating owl. And the collaborating owl has high concern for self and high concern for others. They value both goals and relationships, and they tend to view conflict as a problem to be solved, not just dispensed with, but really solved. And they seek solutions, okay, that achieve both the goals of both parties. So they're really looking at satisfying the goals of both parties. And they see conflict as a means by reducing tensions between people. Because if you don't really resolve the issue, then there's always going to be underlying tension, whether you believe you got something out of the deal or not. Okay? And so with the collaborating owl, the goal is always a win-win. Both sides from a goal standpoint and a relationship standpoint. And so I know that one of the questions that sometimes comes up is, well, then should we always be going towards being kind of that collaborating owl? Well, well, really, it depends because um, you do want to seek win-win solutions, but from understanding conflict management styles, you can use all of the different styles depending on the situation. Okay. And so, what I mean by that is, say, for instance, you have a situation where you identify an individual as the shark. Okay, so they are the competing shark. Okay, and so they're coming at it as, and maybe you're one-on-one with this person, and they're coming at you as that competing shark because they want this. This is what they want, and they're not going to stop until they get everything they want. Well, what stop do you do you think it would be effective if you come at them then as a shark? How many thinks it would be effective to come at a competing shark as a competing shark? Do you think that they would accomplish anything? Yes or no? Okay, I'm seeing terrible idea. No, no, exactly. And I'm sure you guys have witnessed that kind of situation, because if you have two competing sharks coming at each other, then one, nobody's listening. Two, all they're about is getting what they want. And so you tend to end up, locking heads, and you end up with a lose-lose type of situation, because it's really hard to get beyond that type of, kind of competing approach. But if so, then considering the different conflict styles, what style do you think might be effective against a shark? Which of the other styles do you think might be effective against a competing shark? Okay, you can type it in the chat. Compromising fox, question mark, okay. Anyone else? Fox, okay. Collaboration, okay. Any others? I see collaborating, accommodating, the fox, right? Okay, any others? Because what I would suggest is that if you come to a shark I'll start with the collaborating. If you come to a shark in a collaborating type of scenario, do you think they'd be very receptive to that? Let's just work together. Let's identify what both of our needs. Do you think they'd be very amenable to that? Yes or no? Okay, I'm seeing no's. If they want to win, yes, right. But with Yep, I see no's, yeah. Because it's very difficult for a shark to get to that point, to come off their kind of guard, if you will, to get to that point. So I also saw accommodating. I also saw some of you put the accommodating teddy bear. So what would happen in that scenario, do you think? If you have the accommodating teddy bear coming against the shark? It depends on who is facilitating. Very good. A dinner. Okay, the conversation. Yes. Okay. The shark wins, which is what they want. Okay. Right. Well, and that's true, because with the accommodating, with an accommodating teddy bear, so part of the accommodating teddy bear approach might actually work well with the shark, because they're more willing to say, okay, well, let's satisfy your need. Okay, but yes, then the other side of it is, then the teddy bear might not get out of it what they really need. Okay. Now, right, exactly. Thanks, Kathy. I see you stated, I think the collaboration scenario will require long-term relationship building before that could begin to happen. True. And also, Danelle, at what expense? Exactly. And I think whenever you go into a scenario, one, you're identifying the conflict management styles of the individuals involved in the conflict. But yes, you're also considering, okay, at what expense? But then also remember, you can use, because you understand, you know what your conflict management style is, you know how to identify the conflict styles of others, but also you can switch your style, whether you're in the conflict or you're someone that's helping to intercede with the conflict. So you can switch your style using some of the characteristics of other styles. And what I mean by that is several of you mentioned the accommodating teddy bear. Well, maybe you want to use an aspect of the accommodating teddy bear to address the shark, to get to, yes, to maybe concede on a point, to give in, if you will, on a particular point. You might also even want to use a bit of the avoiding turtle, to say, okay, well, we're not going to address this right now. Well, I need you first to, let's first lay out the different points, or let's first understand the source of the conflict, and then we'll get back to what it is that you want. Okay, because that's kind of that, let me withdraw a little bit. And actually, against a shark, sometimes that type of withdrawal is going to be the most effective, because they're not going to get what they want in that moment. And so sometimes they will, if as long as they see a route to coming back to it, a lot of times they're going to be a lot more open to, okay, fine. They're still thinking, I want to get what I want, but at least they've allowed you space to really, as someone said in the chat, set boundaries. Okay. Okay, so that's just kind of an example of how you can use the different characteristics of the different conflict management styles to help address conflict. Okay, so then now what I'd like to do, if I can get that, okay. Oops. So, and this is just looking at all of the different conflict styles and the competing, collaborating, compromising, avoiding, and accommodating, and looking at how on the far left, the up down, the vertical arrow, the lower you go on that that vertical arrow, that's when you get into the avoiding, accommodating realm. And that's when you look at, because the left arrow looks at someone's personal concerns. Okay, you're looking at how you're attempting to satisfy your own concerns. And that's the assertive versus unassertive. And the horizontal arrow looks at uncooperative to cooperative. And as you can see, so the lower you go and on the vertical, and further to the right you go on the horizontal, you really get into more of that lose-lose type of scenario. Okay, or certainly on the far right, and lower portion of the screen, the accommodating. When you go up, that's when you get to the competing far left for the vertical, and the furthest to the left on the horizontal, you get to the competing. And that, again, yes, you're going to end up a win on one side, but then a lose on the other. The far the far right, the upper far right, is where you get into the collaborating. And that is when you tend to find that win-win. But again, you use the different scenarios, the different characteristics to help you move the individuals into a posture of being able to really work together and resolve the conflict. Okay, so conflict styles, again, helps to inform you of your own conflict style, helps you to identify how to use conflict styles and how they might help you with addressing conflict. It helps you to identify the conflict styles of others and how to better assess and address conflict so that you're more effective in dealing with conflict situations that involve others. Okay, so what I would like to do now is do our first breakout session. And this session, so Karis, if you would post in the chat the first video, what I'm going to ask you all to do is watch this video. And the video involves a supervisor, Bridget and Nathan, which are two employees of this particular organization. And then we're going to move you into breakout groups of about 4 or 5 individuals randomly, and you'll have 10 minutes to discuss the video. Okay, so what I'd like you to do is identify the conflict styles of each of the parties, discuss how they handled the conflict, and what could or should they have done to help address or manage or resolve the conflict, what worked, what didn't work. Okay, so just discuss it. And then we'll come back into the larger group. And so the video is about, I think it's maybe about just over a minute. So watch the video, and also when you're moved into the groups, please be conscious of making sure that everyone has an opportunity to speak, okay? And then we're going to come back and debrief. So, so Karis, is that, yep, Karis has posted the link to the video. Please watch the video, and then in okay, so let's now talk about the mediating conflict and some of the keys to mediating conflict. So it's very important that you have respect. If you are the one mediating the conflict, coming in as that third party kind of neutral, whether you are the supervisor or you're another employee or you're just someone that happens to be witnessing this conflict, you always want to have respect. You want to keep it neutral, no judgment. You want to be fair. You also want to be consistent. Okay, because all of these things are going to help you build the trust of the parties involved. So just some things to keep in mind. And approaching the conflict, another way to think about it is in terms of the 5 C's. Carefully listening, considerately looking at the situation, calmly discussing, conscientiously look at the facts, and cooperatively work together to find a solution. Okay, so that careful, active listening, being sure to, with consideration, looking at the facts that are involved, being calm so that you don't escalate the situation, and then really taking care to look at the facts and not so much focus on a particular individual's behavior, and always working together to collaboratively come up with a solution. So the approach to conflict or conflict management is with this goal in mind, deciding what, if any, action should be taken, and intervening before a situation gets out of control. So first, it's recognizing that there is a conflict, okay? So you need to be able to identify when there's actually a conflict situation. You need to investigate to some degree so that you understand the source of conflict. You want to discuss it with both sides. You don't want it to seem one-sided, that you're only going to one of the individuals to get their input. So you really want to discuss it with both sides, collaboratively identify possible solutions. Don't hone in on just one way of addressing it, but really have it be a discussion about identifying what some of the possible solutions might be. And then agree and implement an agreed approach, okay, based on those common goals. And always remember to monitor the situation and discuss ways to ensure that the conflict does not repeat. Okay, so this is the approach to conflict. And then resolving the conflict involves responding to the conflict early and at the appropriate time. Talking in order to address the conflict, listening with empathy, and being able to reflect back your understanding of what the parties are telling you in a very non-judgmental kind of way. Identifying the areas of agreement, because a lot of times when people are in disagreement, they can't hear or see the areas that they're actually agreeing on. But as that third party neutral, that is part of your role to point out to them, well, you're both saying X, Y, and Z, and show them how they're actually, or those areas that they're actually agreeing. Focus on behavior and events, not on personality. So you can look at the particular behaviors, but don't do it to the in the realm of really saying, condemning someone based on their personality. Okay, so you don't want to attack someone's personality. But if a behavior, a particular behavior is inappropriate, you do want to point that out. Make a plan to work on the conflict points and recognize that some conflict, you just might not be able to resolve it. But you have to get to a point of being able to work together. And so maybe the goal isn't that you're going to completely resolve the entire conflict, but you are going to at least get to a place where you can work together effectively and productively. Okay, so just some things to keep in mind with regards to resolving conflict. So when looking at resolving conflict, you need to be clear on the parties involved in the conflict, the source of the conflict, how the conflict was resolved. And you also want to make sure that the actions are discussed, proposed, and then agreed. The parties should agree to the proposed actions. Also making clear who's responsible for taking the action, and date specific on when those actions are going to be accomplished, a date to reconvene, to come together, to review, and again, keeping in mind ongoing monitoring. So again, just to reiterate, it's parties, source, resolution, actions agreed, date to reconvene, and ongoing monitoring are the steps that you want to keep in mind. So now let's go ahead and do a final breakout session. And then we're going to come back and do a very quick debrief and wrap up. And this time, instead of the 10 minutes, let's instead do maybe 7 minutes, Karis. So Karis is going to put in the chat another video. This video is less than a minute long. And please take a look at that video. And then you'll be in your breakout groups for about 7 minutes for a quick discussion. specifically around how you feel the manager should react or handle this conflict. Okay, really focusing on that. And then we'll come back together. Okay. Thank you. And what about Anita? What style do you think Anita is?
She seemed to be avoiding. I mean, she left.
Right, exactly. That's about as clear as it can be for avoiding, huh? Someone that just gets up and leaves.
But
So,
she also could be compromising, because she could have like repeatedly compromised with bringing in these late ideas. Because she said, you always do this, and I'm done.
Yes, and that's true. Yes, she could have experienced some compromising in the past with him. But as far as in this particular scenario, she, for whatever reason, whether it was because she had tried other styles before, in this particular situation, she decided enough is enough. So, okay. And what about the manager? I know you didn't get much insight into him, but what I'd like to hear is just from a couple of you very quickly on what you feel the next step should be for that manager in this type of situation.
Our group felt like he made it worse.
Okay. And how so?
He didn't speak until the lady had already left. And then he completely just minimized the whole thing. Like, why are we even talking about this? It's a 30-second video. So there was no action plan moving forward, no way to deal with the next conflict. And, you know, he had this guy who was coming up with ideas, this employee who was putting himself out there as far as throwing, you know, out ideas. And he was just like, he just, you know, minimized it. Just
no, the very good reactions to that, because yes, he didn't really make the situation better at all. But going forward, what might he do to help address the conflict? What might be his next action to turn things around?
So I think that if the conflict involves one, in my opinion, overzealous employee throwing out ideas at the last minute, and other colleagues being frustrated because of the amount of work that has to be redone, instituting some kind of policy or procedure for how ideas are proposed and putting some timeframes there, and that could eliminate some frustration on both sides or on all sides if there's some kind of plan in place for this is how we get things done and heard and the time frame to work within.
Well, and I think that is a good suggestion of a solution, but I would only suggest that in order for the conflict to really be resolved, it might be better to get the individuals involved to brainstorm on ideas of how to ensure that the conflict does not continue or progress. Versus, you know, because a lot of times if someone's in the middle of a conflict and someone, third party, whether you're a manager or another person on the team, if you come in saying, well, this is what you guys should do to handle this, a lot of times that's not going to be received very well. Okay. And so getting them involved in discussing and then coming up with a solution, you know, getting to that agreed solution is often going to work better because people then feel like they have some stake in it. So that's the only thing I would suggest on that. And just in the interest of time, I'm going to move on and I'm going to start sharing my slides again. And really, it's just to do a very quick summary. Just to say, we covered a lot today and you guys have done a lot of work, and thank you for your participation in really understanding and identifying conflict, the sources, causes, and impact, approaches to conflict, discussing the different conflict management styles, and how to manage and resolve conflict, as well as developing a plan to address conflict. Now, obviously, there's a lot more that we can discuss relative to conflict management, dispute resolution. I mean, I've taught these subjects in a semester-long courses, so and multiple courses. I mean, there's really a lot that can be discussed about this, but I hope that at least with this workshop that you've had an opportunity to be exposed to conflict resolution, considerations, and tools that you can take back to the workplace and use in a more effective way within your particular organization. So please keep in mind the mediation techniques of de-escalation, active listening, neutrality. Keep in mind the different conflict management styles, your own, but then also identifying the styles of others and using these styles to help address conflict. And then, of course, keeping in mind the importance of the 5 C's, making sure that you are approaching conflict in an effective way. And then also making sure that you're setting out a conflict management plan that's workable and agreed by the parties, and that you're doing that ongoing monitoring. So I'm going to thank you all for your participation. I'm going to ask Karis to post in the chat a very brief survey. It'll take you less than a minute to complete it, if you wouldn't mind. And again, thank you so much for your participation. And hopefully you have gotten something out of this workshop. Okay.